Good evening, everybody. I'm Grim Reaper. With me, as always,
Cynical Squid.
and
PerryThePig.
this is Last Week at Epoch. And if you're watching us live right now on Twitch, you'll see on your screen there we've got Mr. Lone Star McFluffin with us. How you doing, Lone
Hello.
Star?
Doing good. How are you?
Doing well, doing well. Perry, you want to take us into your first question?
Yeah, we can absolutely do that. So McFluffin, we've had you on the podcast before. We don't have to dig into your history and find out how you started playing Last Epoch. So I think a lot of people here already know about what you've done in Last Epoch. But today we're kind of talking about something different. There's a little bit of a lull going on in the Last Epoch community. We're kind of waiting. We're in the middle of patch 084. We're about to start patch 085. And there are a lot of people out there, including yourself, who are testing out a kind of brand new MMO action RPG hybrid, Lost Ark.
Yeah.
So we're going to talk about this all day today. I want to know how's it been going for you?
I mean, overall good. I played it for several weeks and had a pretty good time. So I would say, yeah, it was a good thing to do while waiting for the next patch for sure.
So I know Cynical Squid, I think you've also been playing it.
I have.
And then, so I haven't played it all. My spiel that I've been telling people over time is I'm not really looking for a new game right now. For those of you who don't know, my first child is about to be born in maybe a week or so. So we'll see how that goes. But I think that right now would be a bad time for me to start playing a new MMO. So it's not really what I'm looking for. But Grim Reaper, have you been playing any Lost Ark in your time?
Yeah, I'm in the LE Guild on Ledon.
Cool. So I know a little bit about it. I spent a lot of time over the past couple of days watching as many like review videos as I could, trying to get up to speed and know the talking points. So I've got a couple things that I want to talk about. But I think first things first, I kind of just want to open it up. Like, how's it been moving from an action RPG like last I'm going to confuse this all the time. I'm going to say Last Ark and Lost Epoch. So when I make that mistake, I apologize in advance. So how is it moving from a game that's kind of like Path of Exile, kind of like Diablo, the Last Epoch? How is it moving from that into an MMO? Has it been jarring? Has it been fun? Has it been a good change of pace?
Yeah. I mean, so I came from an MMO background. I played World of Warcraft, Final Fantasy 11. Combination of those two for like 15 years as my primary game. So this was kind of going back a little bit to my roots, so to speak, while also throwing in, weird isometric, lots of density in comparison to other MMOs. So it was kind of cool. I also played the beta, so I knew what I was getting into. But yeah, they're very different games. It's one of the things that bothers me a little bit about some of the ways that in particular, like the websites have, like gaming news websites have talked about Lost Ark, because they talk about it like they call it a Diablo-like, and it's not really. Like, there's some things that are like Diablo, but it's not. It's much more of an MMO. So I think people who go into that game expecting a Diablo-like, a Last Epoch-like, a PoE-like, are going to be in for a bit of a surprise, because what you're really getting is an MMO that just has the same kind of like wrapping paper.
That has the same camera angle to it.
Yeah, it's got a camera angle. It's got some density. Honestly, after that, I struggle to find really good similarities between Lost Ark and an ARPG.
Squid, has that been your understanding of it so far? Your impression of it?
Yeah, I definitely agree with that. And so I was also playing in like the betas and stuff for it, and I had a bunch of friends who were going to get into it with me, and like that was the first thing I told them was, do not expect this game to be Diablo, PoE, Last Epoch. Pick your ARPG of choice. Don't expect it to be that. This is an MMO. Killing random creatures out in the middle of nowhere is literally a waste of your time unless they're a quest objective. Because
I want to run around killing bees and squirrels. You mean I can't do that?
Sure. I mean, you can, but like, you watch the World of Warcraft episode of South Park where they're getting like 1 XP per kill and they sit there for a bajillion days. Yeah, that's what it is. You literally get like 2 XP for killing stuff in the world, and then you go turn in a quest and you get like 11,000 XP. So
this kind of reminds me of like how much loot or like how much of an objective it is in Last Epoch to finish an echo, as opposed to like actually killing monsters inside the echo. This sounds like a pretty similar conversation all of a sudden.
Take that and turn it up by like 10 times. And yeah, in that way, I guess it's similar, but way, way more extreme.
Wow, that's crazy. So, I've tuned in a couple times to watch you, McFluffin, playing Lost Ark because I wanted to make sure that I had a good idea of what I'm talking about. Really, the biggest thing that stood out to me, and this is true from like the review videos that I've watched as well, the combat looks awesome. I've watched you, McFluffin, do some like nice combo abilities, and how I describe it in any game that I play, it's kind of like a bonky feel. It looks incredibly bonky. It looks really satisfying to like actually slaughter these monsters in combat.
Yeah, it's very weighty. Like, there's a lot of weight to your hits. There's a visceral effect of it that a lot of people say Last Epoch is missing. And when you play Lost Ark, like for me, LE is like that feeling has never been really a big issue for me. Like I always feel like combat's kind of fine, but I sort of get what people are talking about. But once I play Lost Ark, I'm like, okay, I really get what they're talking about because the feel of combat in that game is just a whole nother level compared to this, even to PoE. Like I don't think PoE can really compare to the level of combat feel that Lost Ark does. I think Lost Ark probably, I can't think of another game that's as good, as isometric as far as combat feel as Lost Ark is.
Is it the wind up of the abilities? Is it how much damage it deals? Is it finally having like the blood effects and the splatter added into the game?
It's all of it. It's the rotational stuff certainly helps. Like you have a big wind up on an ability and it cools down. But I really think it's more about how it affects the enemies when you do it, and then also these overall visual and sound effects just landing right. Like they're just perfectly synchronized in that game, and the enemies react to it in ways that they just don't in LE. Like if you don't stun it or an enemy or freeze an enemy in LE, most of them just laugh at you and keep going. That doesn't happen in Lost Ark. If you hit enemies that aren't push immune, they're going to be affected by a lot of attacks.
Really helps like make the combat feel weighty, like you were saying.
Mm-hmm.
Grim, how's your experience been in Lost Ark so far?
I didn't really like Lost Ark. Like the combat was good and stuff, and I agree with McFluffin on that. But like the whole like quest grindy thing, I just don't like that sort of feel to a game. So then that's how it felt whenever I started playing it. So I only played it for like maybe 2 or 3 hours, and I was just like, you know what? Nah, I'm gonna play Last Epoch. So I ended up turning around and playing Last Epoch instead of playing Lost Ark.
I feel like I have my list of conversation topics on like a shared screen with you. Are you reading my notepad document? That is like the perfect segue into what I wanted to talk about next. I wrote down the new player experience and like specifically the first 5 hours of gameplay. So I've heard a handful of memes about how Lost Ark feels. A lot of something about the G button on the keyboard. Something about that.
The G key is very important.
Very important. I've heard that there's technically a storyline, and I've heard that it is a very end game. It's like centric game. How are the first 5 hours as a new player?
So I luckily got a brand new keyboard before this happened, so my G key is very functional, and that helped me power through the story. I tried. I really did for the first like 2 hours. I tried with the story for that game, and the story in Lost Ark's not very good. It's bad. It's every fantasy trope you want to think of, just kind of thrown into a blender, and yeah, we go from there. So yeah, I'm hitting escape, and then when it says like first clear on it, when you're going through the story the first time and you can't skip it as cutscene, I just like get up and go get a drink or something instead.
Yep, that's the break time.
So the game is I think Lost Ark is 10 years old. Is that when the game first came out?
It's like I think it's been in Korea for like 3 years now.
Oh, it's only 3 years. I thought it was much older than that. Okay. So I know it's on the
I was going to say like 5, I think, but yeah, somewhere around there.
I think retail is like 3-ish, but it's somewhere in there. It's definitely not 10.
Okay, so like nowhere near like as old as like the tropes that like the Diablo 2, even Path of Exile is like about 10 years old. So 3 years ago, if that was the retail launch of Lost Ark, that's relatively recently. Like that's almost COVID time. I feel like we should have had better storylines by that point in time. So if the storyline isn't the driving factor, like what's pulling in the players to make them want to get all the way to level 50 so that they can finally do the end game systems they've heard of?
Yeah, I mean, it is the end game systems that drive most players. They want to get to the point where they can start to grind out their gear. There's a big allure right now about raiding, which isn't even possible yet because there are no raids online yet. So everyone's trying to get their tier 3 gear, which takes a long time, so that they can raid when the raids come out because they're tier 3 raids. So you go through tier 1 content, tier 2 content, up to tier 3 in the end game. So you've got to grind your way through that. There's the dungeons. There's a lot of stuff to do in the end game. Like there's a whole lot of stuff. It's actually overwhelming for pretty much any new player. And I think it's both a blessing and a curse for the game, but it's probably more of a blessing because there is so much to do that you can get sucked into that game for a very long time. And so the first 15 hours or so that it takes you to get through the story, a little bit less if you're really fast about it. I think people who really understand what the game's about just know that's sort of like kind of like your payment for entry into what the game really wants to do and really wants you to do. And so that's where most of the allure is. Also, there's a pretty vibrant PvP community in that game as well.
Which also requires level 50, I think.
It does not. I think it requires like level 21 or 22. It takes like an hour to get there, and then everyone is normalized. So you can do PvP very quickly.
Gotcha. So I want to make sure that we bring this back to Last Epoch as well. So we talked about like maybe the first 5 hours of gameplay. We talked about like the G button, maybe not having the most engaging storyline.
15 hours, first 15.
15. Okay, gotcha. Yeah. How does that compare to Last Epoch in your opinion?
Yeah, so for me, I'd much rather do LEs where it's 3 or 4 hours and you're done, and it's just a straight line and there's not much dialogue. I'm not a dialogue person. I'm not a story person, so it doesn't bother me that Lost Ark's story isn't very good because I'm skipping it anyway. So I would definitely prefer, and I think there's just the truth about me at this point in my life. Like just ARPGs just don't ask a whole lot of me when it comes to dialogue and story, and that's probably better. I just want to go in there and kill stuff and increase the power of my character and get good gear. And so, yeah, I would much prefer just generally ARPGs when it comes to the leveling at this point.
I hear you. And Squid, let me ask you the same thing. What about if you were like a new player going into Lost Ark, as opposed to like a new player, no previous experience, walking into Last Epoch? Like, tell me about like the difference or maybe the similarities between like the first 5 or 10 hours.
So I think Last Epoch and in general, I think ARPGs, because again, like McFluffin mentioned earlier, I don't really consider Lost Ark an ARPG in the traditional sense. It's an MMO with an ARPG combat mechanism attached to it. I think ARPGs in general are just better at that stuff because you get into action quickly, and most of them have figured out the fact that like there's a story and it can be there, but you don't need the story if you're playing an ARPG. We're playing the ARPG to watch the numbers go up.
I feel like it takes me like 1,000 hours in an action RPG before I start thinking about like, hey, who is Itera? Who is this Aerobus person? Like after 1,000 hours, I'm like, who is this? Is this the same person talking to me now as 10 minutes ago? I wonder. Maybe I should have looked that up. That's about my involvement too.
I do the same thing in Lost Ark, except I have to press G 10,000 times to do that. And so that's the big difference for me is I don't want to have to press that button. I actually set up, I shit you not, I set up to do a macro for the G button on my mouse so I wouldn't have to do it. And it didn't work. And so I got stuck doing it manually, but I was trying to get out of it. I just couldn't.
Have you gone back and started watching some Lost Ark lore videos yet to make sure that you haven't reached that point?
I know enough by going through this. Listen, when it goes from all right, you're in magical islands to all of a sudden you're fighting mechs in a new continent, and there's just like, okay, this story doesn't appeal to me. Like, I don't get why there's mechs now, but I don't care.
I was watching videos as I was trying to, get up to speed on the review stuff. And there's gameplay footage all over the place. You shrink down and you become like a ladybug. You do like some like miniature chess, which sounds like an awesome idea. And by the way, I'm kind of into it. I want more of that in my games too. But then something about mechs and like skateboards going, or like what is it, like steampunk skateboards? There was a lot of different
futuristic skateboard.
Yeah, there's some very strange stuff going on.
There's
So now,
hoverboard
like,
mounts and stuff.
Yeah, you can be a level 1 character run around in the magic area now on your like legendary hoverboard.
Cool. Great. Yeah.
Yep. Really good consistency of storytelling and lore, and just overall, world building. It's great.
To be fair, it might be. You don't know though, because you
That's a
haven't
good
actually
point.
listened
I mean,
to any of them.
maybe they tied it all together in some way I could never imagine, but I don't know because I pressed G too quickly.
Fair. So I've been watching about the boss combat as well, and it seems like from a very early stage in Lost Ark, your player character encounters some pretty sweet boss mechanics, like not just avoid this circle, kill the boss, but like really some engaging stuff that you get to do during a boss fight. How has that been for you?
Yeah, it's one of the areas where the game shines. When it comes to boss fights in general, it does a great job of giving you significant mechanics to deal with, and then ramping them up over time. The raids in Lost Ark are legendary for being so challenging, because of so many mechanics and so many ways to fail them. So the game definitely asks a lot of the players skill-wise if they want to play some of the more challenging content. But even early on, like you said, like when you start, even in the story, you'll start to get mechanics and you'll get really good telegraphs, and you'll start to feel really good if you start to time those telegraphs well and don't get hit. The game does a really good job of rewarding you for that.
Does that kind of gameplay translate into an action RPG?
Some of it. The raid mechanics don't, because they tend to be multiplayer. They require multiple players to do them properly. But a lot of the stuff is like similar to what you see in Ellie. Like, here's a telegraph on the ground. It's a cone. It's a big red cone. Don't stand in that, and you won't get hit. That stuff definitely translates. Yeah, I would say like the average stuff in the game translates pretty well. Is not until you get to the higher level content, you're like, okay, you couldn't do that in an RPG unless you wanted to make a truly multiplayer RPG where you had to play multiplayer.
I'm thinking about Jura. I'm thinking about the dungeon boss, who I've just been farming a little bit from my recent weekend character. Jura has like a handful of mechanics, and it's like, avoid this line, avoid this circle, stand in this place. It's a pretty simple fight altogether. It's punishing. It does a lot of damage if you're standing in the wrong spot, but it does have some cool mechanics in it. Is that the top end of what an action RPG could do, or like could you also bring in these additional layers of intensive mechanics that Lost Ark seems to have in it too?
Yeah, I think some of these things you could simplify them into a single player. So for example, there's a fight that I did a few days ago where the boss goes into the center, and you have 8 players, and they all have to go around like they're on a clock. Like there's someone at 12, there's someone at 3, someone at 6, someone at 9, and there's 4 in between, like 1.5, so on and so forth. And they have to stand there, and then orbs come out. There's 2 different elements of orbs that come out, and you have to absorb one, and then you have to shift up one, and then absorb the next element, and then shift up again. You could do that with a single player, to where there's just one place to stand, absorb that orb, then go to the next place. The additional amount of player cooperation that Lost Ark requires, though, is what makes that really challenging, because if one player screws it up, it wipes everybody. So everyone's got to be coordinated. That's where you can't really get that in the RPG. But the general basic mechanics, that you can.
When you start talking about cooperation, I'm having flashbacks to playing League of Legends. And I've never wanted to raid less. I do not want to do this all of a sudden.
It can get spicy.
I was like, maybe I should play some Lost Ark. I do not want to play some Lost Ark.
It could get spicy when someone's screwing it up and not paying attention, and someone's trying to tell them how to do it, and they're like, I got this, bro. I'm good.
And there's open mics as well, aren't there, in the raids?
No, it's all by chat. I've never been in one where there's been an open mic.
The game does have voice chat, but it's like a opt-in voice chat. Like you have to turn it on.
Good. I don't want opt out voice chat. I'd much rather have opt in. Sure.
Agreed. As
So
someone who's also played a lot of League of Legends, yes.
Yeah, no thanks. Can you imagine proximity-based voice chat in League of Legends? Yeah, that's a great thing that I want in my video game. So we talked a little bit about about what's been going on in, I guess, your guild, because Scrim, it sounds like you're in the same guild as McFluffin is right now.
Yes.
So what's it look like when you're gearing up for doing like the PvE guild-based raids and like doing this content together?
Yeah, so it didn't go as I expected. In the beta, we only had tier 1 content. So everyone was pretty well grouped together, people who were playing a lot. And so we got to do a lot of the dungeons together, and it was a lot of fun. One of the things I was a little disappointed in is because there's tier 3 is a lot farther to progress, the faster players end up a lot farther along. So even I was like probably the second tier of speed in our guild, and I was in some cases I was like multiple hundreds of item levels behind and a full tier below the faster people. So it was really very difficult to actually even play with guild members because we're all just like focused on getting to tier 3 so we can do the raids and they come out. And I feel like we lost something in that. I don't know how to resolve that because everyone's just trying to do their best. But that was a little unfortunate for me as far as the progression went in our guild.
But the PvE and like when you're playing with people, it reminds me of like Path of Exile, right? So Path of Exile, if you're PvE, if you're playing along with people, you have 2 or 3 or 4 people in the same map. But for the most part, one person's gear allows them to just like push faster, run faster, blow up the entire screen with Herald of Ice, and then everyone else is just kind of running behind. So Lost Ark doesn't have that same feel, right?
Not to that extent. So it's definitely we had it happen where at one point one of our guild leaders, Zakar, was in a guild with us or in a dungeon with us, and he was in the next tier, and he just was running it with us to help out, and he did like 60-70% of the total damage for a 4-player group. So he's really carrying, but not to the extent that it is in PoE. And the nice thing about Lost Ark in comparison to like PoE multiplayer is because it's so focused on actually being multiplayer and doing mechanics that someone like that can only carry so far if there's a wipe mechanic. If someone doesn't do it, then we still wipe, even if you've got like a real ringer in your group. So everyone has to contribute. I did like that.
I wonder how that's going to translate into a multiplayer in Last Epoch. So we know that the devs are spending basically all their time making sure that like the technical aspects and the servers and the authentication for Last Epoch is going to run out well. I don't know how much work they really, I guess, I don't know how much time the developers have in Last Epoch to worry about like balance. We're going to have some characters that are just like much, much stronger than other characters. If we're doing like, group arena pushes or trying to kill Aerobis or trying to kill Julra as fast as we can. I wonder how that's going to work out. Have you thought about that?
Yeah, not just that, but the buffs that you can give to your allies. Right now, it only affects you if you have minions, minions. When you can start passing those on to other players, if they're at the same level of power, some of them are going to be so incredibly OP once they synergize with each other. Yeah, there's a lot of balancing that has to happen in LE before multiplayer, or else it's going to be pretty crazy. And I have a feeling it's just going to be pretty crazy, and they're going to have to do a lot of balancing after the fact.
It's still pre 1.0. It's fine. We're allowed to have busted build. It's fine. Everything's fine.
Yeah, we're gonna bust a lot of things on the
I'm sure about
multiplayer patch.
So how about instead of talking about PvE, I want to ask. So this is something that's like totally different than what Last Epoch has to offer. What about PvP? Have you been doing any of the like PvP stuff in Lost Ark?
Yeah, I haven't. I don't like the PvE style of Lost Ark. Some people love it; it's like their favorite thing. But it's there's basically one type, and it's like team deathmatch. Basically, it's effectively. I think that's all they have. They might have more, but I think it's the only ranked one. And Lost Ark is basically, can you CC the other guy before he CCs you? And I just never liked that play style. I'm not a huge PvP guy anyway. Like I liked Battlegrounds and World of Warcraft. I do those, but I didn't want to duel anybody. I didn't want. That's just not my game. So I was never a big PvP person, but we have several people in the guild that love it, like Foe and Mao just love PvP, and Zakar as well. So there's definitely some people who play LE that also like the PvP side of it. It's just not me.
It's so much other, so many distinct concerns for balance and for how to build the game that like enter as soon as you start putting PvP in there. So they have independent item balancing, they have like independent skill balancing for each of the skills across all the classes, and like it's an entire other game that just happens to be also called Lost Ark. The whole game is different.
Yeah, they balance the gearing by just normalizing everybody. You can't
So
gain advantage
why do you farm gear then?
for the PvE. Like gear is for PvE. You can like world PvP. Your gear counts, but there's only certain areas or certain islands that you can do that on. But PvP is kind of its own. It's just its own thing. It's kind of like playing League of Legends at that point. You just gear doesn't matter. It's your build. You can create your own build out of the skills you have. But then at that point, it really is a skill based PvP system that they have in that game.
Just a lot of CC and not much else.
A lot of CC, and there's some CC counters, and knowing when to use your CC counter against the other guy's CC and use your CC against them before they counter you. Yeah, that's how I understand it.
It sounds like a good time. And then I want to make sure that I'm. Oh, go ahead.
I was gonna say I played it for like 20 minutes in beta, and I was satisfied with that. I didn't need to go any further.
Sounds good. And then I want to make sure that I still answer or ask questions to the other two here. So yeah. Squid and Grim, have either of you done the PvP in Lost Ark?
I played like 3 matches of it and was like, "Yep, it's what I thought it was." It's pretty much what McFluffin just said. It's literally just trying to land CC abilities and use your cleanse at the correct time and all that stuff, which is not really the style of PvP that appeals to me personally as a player. So yeah, didn't really mess with it very much so far.
And then Grim, in your 2 hours of introductory gameplay, were you going into the PvP realm?
No, I did not do the PvP at all.
It's nice that we're all kind of on the same page about this. Like, okay, so no one here is like really a PvP kind of person.
Yeah, I can see Grim really liking it. He loves League of Legends. I could see him getting into it.
Oh yeah. But I really like Perry's idea to have that in-rage voice chat so they can hear me laugh whenever I'm killing them.
No. Can you imagine like the small circle around you, like the nearby radius of a bastion of honor? Like anytime that a player is inside that circle, they just like hear you laughing. We don't need that. No.
It's its own CC, really.
It's true. It's true.
And you need to counter it at the right time by muting your speakers. All right, jokes aside. Oh, he muted himself. All right, so jokes aside, I wanted to ask about something that that action RPGs sometimes have. So Lost Ark, man, Last Epoch doesn't really have this mechanic. PoE has some versions of this mechanic, but when you get in the world of MMOs, it's really heavy there. So what about dailies? Is that part of the MMO experience that you're into?
No. In fact, I'm putting the game down for now, largely due to the daily system and the way they do grind in that game. And it's part of the reason why I quit World of Warcraft back when I was a Mythic Raider, because I just didn't want to keep up with the dailies. I didn't want to keep up with that minutia of gain for doing that, and falling just ever so slightly behind because I wasn't logging on every day and playing for 45 minutes in content I didn't like. So, and Lost Ark has that. It definitely has that. So, yeah, this is the way that MMOs seem to have gone. I was actually talking to my chat about this a couple of days ago, because doing the daily stuff in Lost Ark worries me a little bit, just ever so slightly, about the way that the dungeon is set up, where there's daily rewards and you have to go and look at them. And I'm like, I hope more mechanics like that don't end up in Last Epoch.
Yeah, are you talking about dungeons in Last Epoch? Or are you talking about dungeons?
In Last Epoch, where you go to the dungeon and check the reward, and if it's good, you might grind it out, even though that's boring as all hell, because it's whatever exalted amulets today. I don't like the game telling me when I should do the content like that to get my rewards, and that's something that Lost Ark does a lot of. And the dungeon system in LE is the only example I can think of that's kind of a little bit like that, but it's also new content. So I'm a little worried. Or worried is not the word. Just a little concerned that this doesn't like start to be a thing where daily, rewards are ever present in LE.
So I wanted to make sure we talked about this specifically. So I'm gonna ask, I'm gonna see if I can ask the questions like maybe a new way. So your own background, you have a lot of background in psychology. I know from just watching you stream and hanging out with you, you read out of your psych book periodically. You talk about the experience you've had in the past. Do you what are your thoughts on like a game developer building the game with those psychological like tools in mind, because they're using a fear of missing out to like encourage you to like
FOMO.
log in every
Absolutely.
single time.
Yep,
Like
it's
what
absolutely
are
FOMO.
your thoughts on that? Tell me about it.
So some of what I'm going to say here is controversial to some people, because a lot of how you feel about it also depends on how you feel about pay to win mechanics, which Lost Ark uses. So a lot of FOMO that happens in Lost Ark, in my opinion, is due to the pay to win, because there are ways to circumvent a lot of the daily grind, and it involves using your credit card. So FOMO is a pretty strong, motivator of spending money to avoid missing out if you don't want to do the content. So yeah, I have a lot of thoughts about pay to win. I don't know if we have enough time for that today.
We can start with the conversation. So we've got about 25 minutes, maybe half an hour or so, because I know that you're on a schedule here.
Okay.
I have pay to win as the very last topic. I've skipped over a couple things here, but yeah, I mean, I like the pay to win conversation. I've got my own controversial opinions about it. So generally speaking, just to let you know, like I don't like pay to win. My one controversial hot take is that Magic the Gathering is not a pay to win game. And I like bringing that up because it always seems to make somebody mad, and it's kind of funny. But McFluffin, I do want to hear what you've got to say about pay to win.
Okay. I mean, there's a lot of ways we can go with this. So I guess a good starting point is to talk about Lost Ark and where it is, me on the spectrum of pay to win, because it's relatively low for a Korean MMO. There's not a whole lot of pay to win in comparison to a lot of Eastern MMOs currently.
Black Desert
But
Online.
what's that?
Black Desert Online.
Yeah, BDO is a lot worse. But for a Western MMO, it's very pay to win in comparison to most, or at least not as good at hiding it. Like World of Warcraft's got a lot of pay to win that's just really good at hiding it behind that token that you buy to get your gold, and then use that to buy your way into raids and whatnot. But Lost Ark just sells you the stuff you want. It's like, here you can buy this crafting material, or you can buy that daily getting done immediately, or you can go to the auction house and you can exchange your crystals for gold to go to the auction house to buy the gear you want. There are limits to how much that will benefit you. Like there's only so much crafting material you can buy per day. There are only so many dailies you can do per day, and you can do only as many as other people can. And you can buy that stuff using in-game gold as well. So if you farm enough, then you can possibly somewhat keep up at least with a pay to win person. And also there's like hard limits on how far you'll get. But that stuff is definitely in the game. It's definitely there. And for someone who's used to a Western MMO, it might be a little shocking just how much it's there once you open up that store.
Does that make you want to play the game? Does it make you want to not invest time in the game, or are you kind of ambiguous about it?
It's tied to the daily grinds to me. It's a big downside for me. It's a big demotivator. Not so much. I thought it would be more about, I just don't like the fact that someone else is just using their credit card to keep up with me. But it's really not as much about that. It is the more I see how much I am, what's the word, inconvenienced for the pay to win elements by creating these systems of FOMO that don't need to be in there otherwise. They wouldn't need to be in there if there's no other alternative way to get around these inconveniences, which is the credit card. So I have to do things that are inconvenient to me and not fun for me, because they want other people to circumvent that with real money.
Does it? What's the word for it? Maybe like artificial roadblock or speed bump? Is that a phrase that kind of describes what you're talking about?
Yeah, it's
Okay.
creating the problem to sell the solution. and I'm not going to buy the solution, which means I have to go through the problem. I have to deal with the problem, which just naturally makes it less fun for me. Like I just have to do more things that I don't find fun. And so I spend a lot more time thinking about all the unfun things I have to do in a game that otherwise is very fun.
I hear where you're coming from. So, Squid, you're playing this game right now as well. Been investing some time. What level are you in Lost Ark?
So my Berserker is level 50. I'm in tier 2 gear currently. So we haven't quite hit tier 3 yet. And then I have some alts that are scattered across various levels, ranging from low 20s into early 40s.
And my understanding of alts is that this whole thing is a period scheme or a pyramid scheme where all of your alts
Yes.
funnel the currency and the crafting materials back up to your main character. So
Yeah, effectively, yes.
all right. It's one big MLM. Listen, I've got some soap to sell you after this podcast is done, but I digress.
Excellent.
How does the pay to win stuff influenced you? Does it make you want to do things? Does it make you not want to do things? What's it been like?
Okay, so I'm gonna go ahead and join you on the hot take seat of Magic the Gathering is not pay to win; it is pay to compete. There's a difference between those two things. And I think that Lost Ark falls more on the pay to compete side than actual pay to win. I don't disagree with McFluffin, however, though, that the skipping of dailies by just paying for them with a credit card is somewhat off putting to me because, like, to me, it just nullifies the existence of the daily at that point if I can just pull out a credit card and skip it. They're like, okay, it doesn't actually exist then if you've got the money to blow on the game. Um, that said, it doesn't discourage me from playing the game or anything like that. Look, I've played enough crappy mobile phone games where like you're going to have a really, really egregious pay to win model for me to be truly phased by it at this point.
And then Grim, I don't know every video game you've ever played. So you're gonna have to help me with this. Have you played pay to win games in the past? What are your thoughts on that kind of thing?
There's a couple of games that come to mind whenever you say pay to win. And whenever I think of pay to win, I think of some of the crap that I've heard about Path of Exile with people buying currency on that game online just to be able to buy their gear. Um, I don't think pay to win is right at all in the least bit. And the reason why I don't believe that is because most of the time you take into consideration your player base, you got a lot of kids that play games. The kids don't have jobs. So what do they want? They end up wanting, to bum money from their parents. So it creates this kind of loophole of kids trying to get their credit cards from their parents. And I just don't like the idea of something being there that's advertised in front of my kid that's going to make them want it so bad just for a game. It's something that's not physical merchandise. You know what I mean? It's virtual property, so it's not real. There's nothing they're going to get back from it. So because of that, that's kind of off-putting with me with virtual stuff.
I hear what you're saying. McFluffin, I know you've played a lot more MMOs than I think any of us here. I think you're a big MMO player. Sounds like from your past. What pay to win stuff have you run into in the past? Like you said World of Warcraft had like a little bit of pay to win. It was kind of hidden behind some layers. What about the other games you played?
Yeah, and like Squid brought up, a lot of it depends on how you define pay to win. Um, there's been a lot of changing of what the term pay to win means. A lot of people coming up with new definitions, like pay to compete's a new one to me. I've never even heard of that one. So there's ways that you can be, it's not pay to win, it's pay to compete, or it's pay to progress. So I'll just blanket umbrella it to clarify when I say pay to win, I mean anything that you can buy that gives you some sort of benefit in the game that you would otherwise wouldn't have, like you can level up faster, or you can get gear, or whatever it might be, anything where you can use real world money inside the game, which doesn't just apply to MMOs or online games. Like you can do this in a lot of different games. So when you have that much of an umbrella on it, there's a lot of like almost every game has something with it. I mean, even PoE has the stash tabs where you're getting some sort of benefit by being able to stash away stuff faster and play faster and be more efficient. So it's hard nowadays to find an MMO that doesn't have something in it, right? Some sort of In fact, actually, Classic WoW didn't, because it was before all this pay to win crap even started to occur. But my understanding is, I think they've leaked some into the new, or the next expansion of Classic WoW. So I don't even think that's held. Um, yeah, so it's really hard to find that any MMO doesn't have some level of it, and then it just becomes, okay, what's palatable to you? What's acceptable? What are you willing to deal with on the pay to win spectrum of
Is
these
this
games?
like a free game versus subscription service
Even
versus
subscription
full price
services
game?
now, like I said, World of Warcraft, it's it's not as much as Lost Ark, but it's pretty close. It just does a better job of concealing it, because you just have to buy the token to get, you get the token, you sell the token on the auction to get the gold. Then you use the gold to buy a carry, which is all not against terms of service. So that's pay to win, as far as
It's
I'm
all just
concerned.
part of the game at that point.
Yeah, it's just part of the game. You buy the token from Blizzard, it's completely legitimate. You sell the token in the auction house, completely legitimate. And then how you use your gold in the game is also up to you.
Talking about the stash tabs in Path of Exile. So for me, like stash tabs, if you want to be as strict as you can, which is a position that I like to be, yeah, I mean the stash tabs are pay to win. They give you an economic advantage over other people. I would call it like, on a scale of like 1 to 10, it's like really, really low of what my own personal definition would be. But yeah, it's still on the scale. One of the things that I liked really early on about Last Epoch is that the stash tabs are just like things you buy with gold in game, which I think is great. I think it's an excellent solution. It just makes me want to play the game more because I have these stash tabs, because I want to store more stuff. It kind of makes me wonder, like, what is going to happen in the future of Last Epoch? I hope the pay to win stuff doesn't happen. I know that they're going to have cosmetics, and I'm going to buy the cosmetics because I like looking good. But then there's this other component about like, well, we have a lot of gold in the game, and I don't. Maybe this is too much of a tangent to pay to win, but like having gold in the economy, like, man, I really hope we have something else to do with gold when it comes to Last Epoch, because there's just nothing to do with that thing right now.
Yeah, so there's kind of two points there. One is EHG ever going to dip its toes in pay to win? And then the second one is, how do we spend our gold that we keep accumulating? The only thing I can say on the pay to win stuff is EHG has been very clear that they have no interest in pay to win or pay for convenience to be sold. But that's right now. Anything can change. Yeah, they get bought by Tencent in a year from now, and all of a sudden, everything changes about that. So who knows what the future holds? Fortunately, I think they've had a really good philosophy about it so far, and they've been very clear about it. But and as far as like gold sinks, we definitely need a lot of gold sinks. We're gonna have a huge problem with inflation if they don't come up with some gold sinks.
Especially when it comes to trading, because like, is gold still going to be the thing that's
They
going to
claim
happen?
it is.
Yeah, I mean, they said so. They said gold is going to be the mechanism that we use to trade.
Yeah, if it's an auction house, it will be. If it's player to player trade, we'll see.
How has trade been in Lost Ark? Like, is there one set currency? Can you trade item for item? Is it like you trade? So in Path of Exile, you kind of trade whatever you want. You can trade one item for a belt. You can trade a belt for a helmet. You don't need to have like an intermediary of chaos necessarily. So how's that been in Lost Ark?
Yeah, there's only like 342 currencies in Lost Ark, so it's not that big a deal. It's
really how convenient. That's good.
Yeah, there's a ton of currencies in it, and some convert with others and others don't, and some can be traded and some can't. So, but there is an auction house, and some things can be traded in the auction house and some can't, and some can be traded sometimes, a certain number of times, and others can be traded infinitely. Some can only be traded until you've interacted with it. The game is very complex in its economy, and I do think that is related to its monetization system. The auction house is relatively convenient. That, like, when you want to trade something or when you want to buy something, the auction house is a relatively well done system, although the UI could use some improvements. But once you actually get in there, you can find what you're looking for pretty easily and buy it pretty easily.
With only 340 different types of currency.
Yeah, so the auction house only uses gold, but you can convert royal crystals into crystals, and then crystals into gold, or you can convert gold up to crystals. But this
sounds like every bad mobile game obfuscated currency to dollar ratio that I've ever seen.
Good. You have silver, which you can't trade to other players. You just use the NPCs. Okay. You have, they call it fions, I think, which are another currency that you need to use to buy on the auction house that you can only get so many of per week. It's supposed to supposed to help with the pay to win aspect, I guess, but that's another currency. Yeah.
Cool. And
Trying
then
to
I
get into
guess
pirate coins and the blood shards or whatever from the guild. You don't want to know.
It's a lot. It really
it's a lot of
is.
currencies. All right, got it. I do want to ask. This is the last big question that I have until we can kind of talk about whatever you want. Is when it comes to Last Epoch, there's a lot of questions in my Twitch chat, your Twitch chat, anybody's Twitch chat, asking, does this game have longevity? Is this game going to be like the next Diablo? Or it's going to be like the next Path of Exile? Is this going to be a game that I'm going to be able to sink thousands of hours into? So I know where I stand on that, and we don't have to talk about that right now. But I want to ask about like Lost Ark as well. Is Lost Ark a game that people are going to like have as their main game? They're going to play for several thousand hours. Is it going to still have that longevity now that it's here in the West?
For me, yeah, it's gonna not for me. Like I won't play it that much, but yeah, I believe that the game's got plenty of content, longevity. They've got so much content to release over here still. Like we're not even at this first raid. There's only like half the classes, and it's the number 2 game in Korea still after 3 years, just behind League of Legends. So I don't see any reason why it won't be much different than that. It's still holding over 1 million concurrent players every day in the West, on Steam. And yeah, there's so much content in that game. Like you can spend I know your wife likes turtles. You can spend about 4 months or so just getting a turtle skin for your sail or for your ship if you want to. So there's plenty to do.
True.
Yeah.
Yeah, Cynical, go ahead.
Yeah, it's definitely a game that if you really wanted to, if you wanted to explore all the content the game has to offer, you could definitely sink, thousands of hours overall throughout everything that's going to come out, assuming we get all the releases to equal us to what they've got over in Korea and stuff. But then again, I also think LE. I mean, I've got 1,000 hours in LE according to Steam already, and game's also not done. So clearly, I think both of them are games that you can definitely sink 1,000+ hours into.
So you mentioned my wife, who I'm totally going to bring into the conversation here. As soon as I told her that you could have a boat and then you could farm up some currency or something to turn that boat into a turtle and then just turtle away around the entire world, she was into it. So she downloaded it and took her like 14 or 15 hours to download it because she's on Wi-Fi. But she is so sad about the gender locked classes. And she just like cannot get over like not being able to be like a male Sork or like a female warrior or something. It's like when it comes to having like so it's built on the Unreal Engine, and like you have like all the normal like the eye features and the eyebrow features and having your jaw be this big and having your ears look like this. And you have so many things, but you don't have genders. Like you can't just be like a female warrior.
Yeah, it's a very Eastern MMO thing. It is something that they have said, as far as I recall, they'd like to offer a male and female version of all of the different play styles. They still won't, like, you won't be able to be a male Sork, but maybe they'll make a male Warlock that plays very similarly. They already have that on several classes, where the one class is like a Striker, and I think Striker, like, I can't remember which ones are which, but like Striker and War Dancer are like female and male versions of it. Those might not be equivalent, but there are those. There are where it's okay, if you want to play the female version, you play this class, which is pretty close to the male version, which is this class. But
So
a
like
lot of
not
the classes
not
currently
not
don't
not the
have that.
exact same skills, but like
They're not
kinda.
they're not the exact same, and I don't think they ever will be.
It's too bad. I don't know, man. Ever since I watched Encanto on Disney Plus, I want to cosplay Luisa. I want to be like a giant burly warrior, just like flipping things over.
Yeah, I mean, I prefer it. It's not gender locked, but they don't listen to me, unfortunately.
Listen, not everyone has the same video game fantasies as I do. I understand. So that covers the questions that I wanted to make sure we talked about while we were talking about, similarity differences, Lost Ark, even, Path of Exile, Last Epoch. Talked a little bit about Diablo and World of Warcraft too. What's on your mind? So what's going on with Lost Ark? How's it been? What else do you want to talk about?
Yeah, I mentioned a little bit ago that I'm probably taking a break from it, or at least going down to very casual, because the grind is really, really excessive and requires you to do a lot of activities I don't really care for. So I guess you could say I'm burned out on it, but not not in the typical way, like not the way I burned out on classic World of Warcraft, where I just got tired of doing the raid, and or other factors that weren't related to like mechanisms of progression. It just the just playing the game got I just burned out on it after a while. Lost Ark just yeah, it's something to do with the way that it forces me into certain content that and the alts, we brought up the alts before. People who like to play multiple characters and multiple builds are going to love it because it's not only set up to allow you to do it, but it highly encourages you to do it to help out with your main character. But for me, that's actually not that much fun. I prefer to really focus on one character for a long time and then switch eventually. So I've also found that when I switch characters, which is what I'm supposed to do, I don't like it. I'd rather just go back and play my Sork, which is my main. So yeah, for me, Lost Ark, I had a really good time in it. I definitely got my money's worth, and I do think it's one of the best MMOs in the market right now. I actually just think I'm getting old. I just think that MMOs are changing in a way that is not conducive to what I liked about MMOs in the past. Like some of the things are definitely very similar, but some of the other things like the daily progressions and locking you out of content, expecting you to do all of the content and lots of horizontal progression instead of vertical progression. It's just gone in a way that maybe it doesn't fit me quite as well, and ARPGs are just a much better fit for me at this point in my life.
I hear you. I hear you. Man, I like that. I like that take a lot. It makes me happy. Cynical. I guess I want to ask for your feedback on that too. It's like what's been going on with you and Lost Ark? I don't. I wish I had a more specific question.
No,
I'm
you're
still
good. You're good.
processing.
Yeah. So, like I said, I'm not in tier 3 stuff yet on my Berserker. I do find myself playing the Berserker way less right now because like the tier 2 to tier 3 grind is super real and it's kind of like borderline soul crushing in a
It's
way.
bad. Yeah, it's bad.
So I have been playing my alts a lot more. I am like I've played a ton of MMOs in my life, and I am like the person who makes 37 characters. So if the game will let me, so Lost Ark does appeal to me in that sense because, like you said, it's my character sheet is basically a giant pyramid scheme where everybody's funneling money to the top. So it doesn't bother me like that, but I don't know. We'll see. We'll see if I can get to tier 3 in time for like raid content and stuff. And if I don't get there, it's not the end of the world to me because like I don't think Lost Ark's going to be the main game I play. To be honest, like it is right now, just because it's the new shiny thing and my friends and stuff are playing with me. But like once Last Epoch gets multiplayer and I can get my friends who have been holding out for multiplayer to actually play Last Epoch, I think I'll definitely be focusing more on Last Epoch going forward from that point.
I think I've got one more question. Then I want to sneak in here at the end of the podcast. Then, so all of you have played a lot more MMOs than I have. I played like a tiny bit of Guild Wars when I was 10 years old, a long time ago. Is there something from an old MMO, or like maybe like a paradigm, or just something that happened in the game in those MMOs that used to maybe hook you into the genre that isn't in Lost Ark that you want to see there?
So I guess we'll go MMO hot take for me here. I hate that factions don't matter in MMOs anymore.
Like faction,
Uh,
like big PvP world events?
no, like factions within like the game.
Hmm.
So like I used to play a ton of EverQuest, like way more EverQuest than is healthy for a human being. And there were cities that I could not go to in that game with certain characters because the guards were just like, nah, bro, you can't come here. And like like World of Warcraft has that to an extent, but it's like really easily avoidable. And in EverQuest, that wasn't always an avoidable thing. Like sometimes you just had to go to an area where the guards may just attack your character because you killed the wrong NPC at level 17 because you thought he dropped a cool ring. You know what I mean?
That sounds like a living world consequences kind of thing.
Right. And I can't think of a single MMO out right now that truly has that as like a consequence of like doing something within the game actually matters later on. And I don't know, I just kind of miss that because like that was one of my favorite things to do in EverQuest was like one of my characters made one of the city guards mad in a city, and I made a new character, leveled him up specifically just to go kill those guards.
All right.
I am that guy.
All right. And then McFluffin, same question to you. Is there something that comes to mind about maybe like a paradigm or something that used to be in MMOs that maybe you don't see as much in the current games?
Well, there's certainly one in Lost Ark. I mean, there's probably several, but the one of my biggest gripes with Lost Ark is I can't just get together, my friends, go into Abyss dungeon 6 hours straight, just chain run that dungeon and farm gear. You can't do it because you run it once on your character and you're locked out for the rest of the week. So dungeons are my favorite. Dungeons and raids are why I play MMOs, and Lost Ark doesn't want you to do it very often. And except for on alts. If you want to play enough alts, then you can run them almost all week. But you've got to do them on all these different characters instead of just being like, okay, me and my buddies and my Sork, my main, and their mains, we're gonna go in there and we're gonna farm until we get whatever item it is we want to get out of this dungeon. I miss that. Like it's just it wasn't in the game, and I think it's a big miss that they locked that content, the best content, and it prevents a lot of that community engagement stuff between guilds and friends.
I hear you. And then Grim, I want to ask you the same question. So full disclosure, I am not a part of this question because I didn't play enough MMOs when I was super young. But Grim, is there something that, you know what, I'm going to open it up to like action RPGs as well because I know that you haven't been playing too much Lost Ark. Is there something that like you used to see in these games, maybe an RPG, action RPG, maybe an MMO that you don't see in games right now?
Other than really good storylines, like I usually get pulled into an MMO if it's got a good storyline. Most of the MMOs these days don't really have good storylines, so it doesn't really like suck me in and grab my attention.
I hear you. Well, man, with that, I just can't wait to find out what's going on with Last Epoch. I kind of want to know who the observer is. Honestly, when I look at the Twitch category and I'm trying to find someone who's playing some Last Epoch when I'm not streaming, I look at like the logo for the game itself, and there's like Itera on one side, and then there's a dude with a weird mask and a line down the middle on the other side. And I started thinking to myself, I have no idea who these people are. And I kind of want to, so I'm looking forward to it. We'll see. But I think with that, we are on a schedule for this podcast here. We can't go for an hour and a half or 2 hours like we have previously. So,
Sorry.
No, it's okay. McFluffin, thank you so much for being here. I appreciate that.
Thank you for having me.
And then for the people who are live here in chat as well, thank you for joining us. I know that there's been quite a bit of chatter going on in Twitch chat. So thanks for participating. Thanks for sharing your thoughts as we move through the conversation here. And then Grim, do you want to sing us out?
Yep. All right, guys, it's going to do it from all of us here at Last Week at Epoch. I'd like to thank you all for tuning in, and we'll catch you in the next one.